The serpent coils tighter, Rome sleeps, and we alone keep the vigil.
Then we move at dawn.
Is it possible that the fate of one of the greatest empires in history wasn't decided in the Senate, but in some of these secret, shadowy ceremonies? Could they have been pulling the strings all along?
Okay, let's get into it. To even understand why these secret societies popped up in the first place, you have to get a feel for the official religion of Rome. And honestly, it left this huge gaping hole for something new, something a lot more personal.
You see, for the average Roman, the state gods, Jupiter, Juno, Mars, they weren't really there for your personal salvation. Worshipping them was more like a public duty, a civic responsibility, kind of like paying your taxes or serving in the army. It was something you did for Rome.
This whole system was designed to keep the empire running smoothly. The rituals were all about maintaining public order and what they called the Pax Diorum, the peace of the gods. And the absolute peak of this, the imperial cult, where the emperor himself was basically worshipped as a god. It was all very grand, very political, but for a lot of people, it just felt empty. It didn't answer those big human questions like, what happens to me when I die? Or how do I find some real meaning in my own life?
And right into that spiritual void, something totally new and electrifying appeared: the mystery cults. And these were not about the state. They were all about you.
I mean, just look at the difference here. It's night and day, right? Where the state religion offered public order, the mystery cults promised you personal salvation. Instead of just being a boring civic duty, they offered these ecstatic, deeply emotional experiences. It was a complete flip from community obligation to individual transformation. So what exactly were these cults? Well, most of them came from the eastern parts of the empire, places like modern-day Turkey, Egypt, and Iran. They were all about these secret initiation ceremonies, these mysteries, that promised you a direct one-on-one connection with a god. And, this is the big one, the secret to a happy afterlife.
And their appeal was just massive. Now, you might be thinking this was some fringe movement, but no way. We're talking about literally everyone, from emperors and senators all the way down to soldiers on the frontier and slaves in the city. They were a huge hit, with people who were kind of on the margins of traditional Roman society, like women and foreigners who were often shut out of the official religious scene.
But getting into these inner circles, well, it came at a price, and the rituals could be incredibly intense, even shocking. We're talking about everything from wild, ecstatic frenzies to actual bloodshed.
Let's start with maybe the most famous and scandalous of them all, the cult of Bacchus, the god of wine and good times. What started as this private religious thing soon blew up into a huge public scandal.
So, picture this. The rites of Bacchus, the Bacchanalia, they started out as these private ceremonies just for women. But then they just exploded in popularity. They opened up to men, and they became these massive, wine-soaked festivals. And the Roman authorities? They were absolutely horrified. Rumors started flying around about wild sexual rituals, criminal plots, even ritual murder, all happening under the cover of religion.
But okay, if you think the Bacchanalia were scandalous, the rites of Cybele, the great mother goddess from Anatolia, well, they were on a whole different level. Check out the cult's main festival. It went down every March and was this super dramatic reenactment of the story of Cybele and her lover, Attis. It kicked off with mourning his death, hit this crazy peak on the Day of Blood with some pretty extreme stuff, and then ended with a massive party celebrating his rebirth.
And on that Day of Blood, this is where things got really intense. The most hardcore male followers, totally caught up in this religious ecstasy, would castrate themselves. It was seen as the ultimate act of devotion, symbolically giving their own fertility to the goddess. These men became the Galli, the eunuch priests of Cybele. And they lived in this very strange place in Roman society. On one hand, they were sacred priests of an official state cult, because Rome had actually adopted Cybele, but on the other hand, as eunuchs, they were forbidden from ever becoming Roman citizens. They were seen as profoundly un-Roman, living as these outsiders who were both revered and looked down upon.
So as you can probably imagine, the Roman establishment was deeply suspicious of all this. You've got secret meetings, crazy emotions, foreign gods, bloody rituals. It was basically the opposite of traditional Roman values. And that suspicion, it was about to turn into violent suppression.
you have to understand, the Senate didn't just see these groups as religious communities. No, they saw them as a potential state within a state. A whole network of people with secret oaths and loyalties that might just be stronger than their loyalty to Rome. It was a direct challenge to their power.
And the response was brutal. In 186 BCE, the Senate launched this massive crackdown on the cult of Bacchus. The scale is just shocking. 7,000 people were arrested or even executed. This was a very clear message. The state will not tolerate religious movements it can't control.
And then, the Senate issued this famous decree that just systematically tore the cult's power apart. They limited how many people could worship, they made it so you needed official permission for any rites, and they outlawed the secret oaths and private funds that made the cult a potential hotbed for conspiracy. They were basically trying to cut the head off the snake.
This whole crackdown had a huge, lasting effect. It forever tainted these mystery cults in the public eye. They weren't just seen as alternative spiritual paths anymore. Now they were viewed as subversive, dangerous, and fundamentally anti-Roman.
But of course, this history, all this secrecy, power, and suppression, it didn't just end there. Oh no! It has fueled centuries of speculation, and that's what takes us from historical fact into the wild world of modern conspiracy theories.
Modern theories often imagine something far more organized and way more sinister. This quote really nails the vibe. This idea of a single, hidden society just lurking in the shadows, pulling all the strings like puppeteers.
And that leads us to this fascinating concept of a shadow senate. Was there really some secret council of elites manipulating emperors like Caesar and Nero? The truth is, historical evidence for one single unified secret society is pretty thin. But the fear of one, that was very, very real. And what these mystery cults really show us is a powerful truth. Wherever official power fails to give people meaning, other networks will always rise up to fill that void.
And so, that leaves us with one last thought to chew on. We base almost everything we know about the past on the records that happened to survive. But this whole story forces us to ask a really crucial question. How much of history is shaped not by what was written down, but by the secrets that people kept? What if the real story is the one we'll never know?